Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to another guest episode on the Make Mental podcast. As always, I am so excited and beyond blessed to bring another guest and storyteller to you guys. Today, we have on Tori Peyton, Grow with Tori on Instagram, and she will be speaking to us today about something very personal to her. But I got very excited for this episode because we're going to kind of combine it or pair it next to another episode. We're going to bring a little bit of an eating disorder, an ED recovery, or an ED recovery, however you guys refer to it, little month to you guys to let you know that it's okay and that you can get through it with a little bit of advice, and there's a community out there for you. So I'm super excited to do this, and thank you, Tori, for joining the Make Mental podcast. We're gracious to have you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and I get so excited every time I have an opportunity to spread any awareness around EDs because they're just so misunderstood. So thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and not to jump right off the deep end too fast, but I'm curious because you're not the first person I've heard this from. What about EDs is misunderstood in your opinion?
That's such a good question. So I feel like just in general, a lot of people think that they're weight disorders and that you have to look a certain way to have an eating disorder, whether that be existing in a larger body with binge eating disorder or existing in a really small body with anorexia, bulimia, whatever it is. And that's just not true. I get so many DMs from people saying, I'm so ashamed because I exist in a normal body. No one knows I'm struggling, but I'm struggling so much with food. Like, what do I do? I'm not sick enough. And it just makes me so sad because you're allowed to struggle in whatever body. The issue isn't actually the food. It's not actually your body. The things you're struggling with are just symptoms of something that's so much deeper. And so I just want people to know that regardless of how you look, it's truly okay to struggle because this is a mental illness.
Yeah. And the thing I think that I heard the loudest was the I am not sick enough, the I am game, the what if game, the oh it can't be me because I don't look like X, Y, or Z, or I get 3 meals a day and I'm blessed to be able to eat half of them. That game is so dangerous to play. When someone starts like what's I know I don't want to jump in too fast. I want to back up here in a second, but what's like in your opinion, obviously this is personal to Tori and her opinion, but what is the line there? Like how not that you have to tell people how to feel, but like how can we help people feel comfortable with the struggle that they're in? Because not everyone's story has to look the same.
I think a quote that I used to embrace a lot in my recovery, but I've kind of gotten away from is comparison is the thief of joy. We are constantly surrounded by hundreds of other people and their stories on social media, and our brains were not wired or created to consume that much information about that many people at one time. And like to have that access to everybody else's stories and to have that ability to compare. And so I always just go back to like, I try to use these mantras to ground myself and to say, hey, like, this is my body. This is my journey. I truly can't compare it to anyone else because no one is as uniquely me as I am. But that said, like, honestly, it's a struggle. And I mean, even for me now, like, I don't want to pretend that things because I chose recovery and because I choose it every day are all of a sudden, sunshine and rainbows. I still get those moments where I'm like, I'm ashamed to struggle in this bigger body. And I look back on when I had an eating disorder and say, she was valid then, but like, I'm not valid now. And so I just want to acknowledge, like, whether you're a recovery influencer or just a random person who chose recovery yesterday, it's okay to have these thoughts, like, and they don't define you. So I think that's my main message on that.
Yeah, I love that. And I couldn't help but think I'm a very firm believer in there's power in language and can we restructure language in order to, especially with mental health, because you can't always fight it with physical recovery. Obviously, we'll get into a bunch of this, but part of my 20%, part of my non-negotiables that I do every day involves physical exercise of some sort just because I am a former athlete and I know that's what my mind and body need, but like language is specifically for mental struggles is so powerful. So I want to know your thoughts on this before we kind of get back into who you are and your childhood and your story. But what if instead of saying comparison is the thief of joy, we can use other influencers and other individuals' stories to say connection is the chief of joy? Do you think that would be powerful
Oh,
enough,
I
or do you
love
think there's
that.
another one?
No, I love that. And it's like a both and thing. And I love that because it doesn't have to be like black and white. So that's so much of what recovery
Mm.
is existing outside of that black and white notion. Like it can be community and connection and not comparison. Like both can coexist. And so I love what you just said. And I'm going to add that to my toolbox because I really like that.
Well, I wouldn't have thought of it if you didn't bring up that other quote. So there you go, a little bit of back and forth. I'm curious, though, to learn a little bit about you. So, who is Tori and what was she like growing up? This is always such an exciting question.
That, yeah, honestly, it's so funny because who I am now, I feel like I'm finally becoming who I actually am. And I'm 26 years old, so that's just like feels like a weird thing to say. But when I look back on my childhood, I don't necessarily look back on it in a really positive light. I'm pretty open about this on social media, even though I don't love talking about it. But I was like a victim of sexual assault when I was 7. So that kind of tainted my childhood in many ways. I struggled with PTSD, struggled with obsessive compulsive disorder, generalized anxiety. I struggled with depression on and off all through probably college, I would say. And then all of a sudden, all those issues kind of went away, and I started dealing with my eating disorder at 19. And now I'm just unpacking all of those things. So, like, I would say the true Tori, the Tori that I'm trying to find and connect with right now is so kind, so loving, truly wants the best for everybody and like just wants everyone to feel loved and just loves God and loves others. And she's such a freaking cool person. And I was even telling my therapist the other day, like, I when I feel like I'm in a low mood or when I'm not doing as well, like I just miss her. Like I love that, like connecting with my authentic self because it's truly like a high. Like there's nothing like it. And so I guess that's a really roundabout way of saying, my childhood story is definitely not a typical one. And I feel like I'm almost like kind of starting my like new life now, which is kind of crazy. But yeah.
Yeah, that I mean, first of all, we're sorry to hear all that, and but we are very proud of you for pushing through that and kind of unpacking it. It's there's never a timeline for this sort of stuff, and the journey comes at different points for everybody. So the fact that I mean, you're still 26 is still young. Like we are still young,
I
so
forget that
you're still.
sometimes.
I know, but that's what I was just talking to a friend the other day, and
Yeah.
I said like I feel younger now than when I was a grad student in college because I was the oldest person in the room. I was they called me grandpa on the soccer team. Like I inherited that role just because there was like 17-year-olds and I got to use my grad year and play. So I'm like 6 years older than some of these guys. Like they were born in like 2003, 2004, and I'm over here like 1900s baby, like ancient.
Yeah.
So now I feel younger, but at the time it was difficult because they looked to me for a lot of advice when I didn't even have that life experience yet. So I think the fact that you can kind of start over now and go through therapy and unpack potential childhood traumas is so powerful, and we are proud of you over here at Make Mental, and I know a lot of people support you for that. But I want to know, like, maybe someone who's kind of in the same shoes as you shares parts of your story, right? Because we don't want to compare too much. We just learned that that is the thief of joy. Someone who feels that strong connection to your story or your light. Where do we start? Because I know there is so many people out there that do have an influence of some sort on this, and we do see so much on social media of like, oh, try this, try that, journal, meditate, therapy, this, that, the other thing. Like it becomes overwhelming. Like I looked at my notebook the other day when I was first going through my journey, and I was like, I had about 30 bullet points of things to try, No wonder why I didn't try any of them right away. There was just too much there. So
Yeah.
where did you start, rather, is a better question.
Honestly, I started way later than I wish I had. I I don't love to like think about it, but honestly, it took me getting to like the lowest of lows to actually get help. And I want to be fully transparent about that. I had gotten to the point where I truly didn't want to keep going. And I just remember calling my mom and sobbing on the phone, like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't want to keep living anymore. I hate my life. Like, this is just all consuming, and I don't know how things can get better. That was 5 years into my eating disorder. So I think my first piece of advice is like, the second you feel like something isn't right, just go to someone, just tell someone. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And I know you want to try to handle it on your own, but I promise you, you can't. Like, you cannot fix it on your own, because it's going to require a lot more support. And maybe that looks like, trusting a family member or a friend, or maybe that looks like getting therapy and getting a dietitian. But I always say, like, the first thing you can do is just tell someone and let them help you kind of figure out a plan.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in speaking it out or writing it down. And I don't know the technical science behind it or the reason why, but as athletes, I know we have a lot of athletes who listen to this podcast. We do a lot of visualization. We picture moments in the game before they happen. We boost up our confidence. Why would we not do that when it comes to taking care of ourselves, right? Like, you study for a test. You don't just wake up and take the test. However you want to look at it in life, I do appreciate the fact that you said speaking it out loud to someone is such a crucial step, because honestly, just something about it being out in the universe is just such a weight off your shoulders. And I know personally a lot of my problems, I say problems, a lot of my struggles. That's one thing I'm working out with my therapist, is rephrasing how I speak, because I'm too hard on myself in that aspect. But anyways, maybe we'll do a session with my therapist if she agrees. That'll be a
I
tough
would
one.
love
But
that. I would love that. I love a good therapist. I'm like, give me more therapy.
I don't want to get too off track, but I think Jonah Hill did that on Netflix with his therapist, if you've seen that.
Ooh, no, I need to see that.
But
I'll
it's
look it up.
reverse, and he is the therapist for his therapist,
Oh,
because
wow.
I mean, this is a lot of therapist, but his therapist, Jonah Hill's, is like near the end of life. I think he has
Okay.
cancer. I don't want to give too much away, but Jonah just sits him down and like just asks him all the questions that he asked Jonah, and it's really really
Oh,
cool. I can't
wow.
remember the exact name, but we'll drop it in the link below for anyone who wants to listen in this episode. But before I forget and get too off track, um, now that I am already way off track, oh, personally for me, like when I have a struggle and it's on my chest, it's sometimes too much for me to handle by myself. So speaking it out loud for someone moves it to my head. And I know personally in my journey, if the struggle exists purely up here and that's where everything feels tight and angry, I can work through that. I'm not the type of person who can work through, I mean, I hold my breath a lot. I clench my jaw. Like, those things physically bother me and tire me out. Is that the same for you, or is it kind of, how do you navigate the chest struggles versus the head struggles, as we'll call them, for lack of better terms?
For me, it's actually the complete opposite. I don't do well when things are in my head. I do really well when I can feel them as sensations in my body. So, like, I do a lot of somatic work with my therapist where I'll literally locate where is my anxiety or, eating disorder voice or whatever it is, where is that in my body? And locating it and then breathing through it and allowing it to be there and accepting it is what I have found helps me a lot work through it. Whereas if it's in my head, I typically get super overwhelmed and I don't know what to do with it.
I find that so fascinating, because I
Yeah.
am like, I mean, for better or for worse, if it's in my head, it's easier for me to hide, which
Mhm.
that has its positives and definitely its negatives. But my therapist is like, if it's in your head and you know that's how you can handle it, what do you do next? Because that's what matters the most, right? You don't want them to be stuck in your head or in your body. You need to get them out. or sort through them as best as possible, or be comfortable with never knowing the answer. That was a new one for me. I didn't know that existed either until recently.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good one. And you just said that, and I'm like, I feel like that's what I literally need to do with so many of my thoughts is just be comfortable not
Yeah.
knowing.
Yeah, well, again, there is so much we don't know. We still are so young, but we also do have to remember there is still so much that we do know. So it's in those times of uncertainty. Can you go back to those positive habits, those good tools in your toolkit that are going to serve you the most? And then how do we build more tools in our toolkit? And I think that, not knowing too much about eating disorders myself, but I think that probably plays a massive role when your eating disorder voice comes out is,
Mhm.
okay, I have been here before. When is a time that maybe I've struggled and listened to this voice, and when is a time that I haven't, and what did I do each time? Is that something that comes into play here, or what is one tool, I guess, that you find very useful whenever your eating disorder comes to have a conversation?
Yeah, I think you said it really well. I mean, knowing, I think the more experience you get under your belt, having even that voice in your head and rejecting it, not listening to it, just gives you so much power. And it's a really cool thing that you can continue to build on. And so I think looking at my past and seeing I was successful in that situation, or I've already faced this situation before, so I can trust that I can do it again. For me personally, that's really important because I really do struggle with trusting myself. And so doing those like fear food challenges or just building up that like internal sense of trust has been really, really important for me. And then I think like also just in the moment, sometimes right now, what I'll do is just remind myself that anything that voice is telling you is a lie. The whole purpose of it is literally to keep you stuck and to keep you going back to it. It's a maladaptive coping mechanism. And so I guarantee anything it's telling you just isn't true. So really the reality is the opposite of whatever it's telling you. And I find comfort in that too.
Yeah, two things there. Fear foods. I'm over here picturing like fish eyeballs and like cow tongue. What
Yeah.
are fear foods, and what is that all about?
Yeah. So, yeah, if you're not in the recovery community, it's probably like a very odd word to hear. But fear foods are basically any foods that you're afraid to eat because of typically the nutritional content. So, it might be like sweets or high fat foods, high, calorie foods, anything that you've seen fitness culture promote, it's like the opposite of that. And so it's the highly processed, typically. Some people are very different. They might have a really healthy food that they fear, but typically for people, it is those less healthy, quote unquote, foods that they get scared of.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification because I do struggle to eat sometimes, but I think it's just because I have to adapt with not exercising as much as I used to, so my body doesn't require as much energy. But to me, as someone who doesn't face an eating disorder, I was thinking like I've heard that term so many times, and I'm like fear foods, and I saw like donuts as an answer, and I'm like, I eat one of those every morning. Like those, that's
Yeah,
my go-to food. Maybe I need less. Maybe I need to be afraid of that a little bit. But again, it's lighthearted if you don't know what it's about too. And I
yeah,
think that right there is one of the biggest misconceptions of just mental health in general is beating yourself up for something you didn't know. I'm going to say that again.
yeah.
Beating yourself up for something you didn't know. You How can you get mad at it, right? If you had good intentions, if you were curious, if you were authentic and truly honest in your exploration or your need for answers or your mistake, right?
Mm.
You can't beat yourself up for it if you didn't know. Moving forward, you have to learn to give yourself grace because you're going to fail again. But up until that first moment of recognition, you have to give yourself the biggest grace of all. What did that look like for you? Like the moment you decided to call your mom, say, I need help. Was there anger? Was there frustration? Was there confusion? I mean, that's such a big moment in your journey. I didn't want to skip over it.
Yeah, and I'm actually, once you release this, I'm going to literally bottle up everything you just said because I think it is so well said. I don't even know exactly how you put it, but like that is gold. So I need the recording of this. But I loved everything you said about just like the grace, and yeah, it was incredible. But so for me, that moment, honestly, I look back at it, and that is a moment I'm really proud of, because I made a freaking promise to myself right then and there that I was never going to go back to my eating disorder. Like, I told myself no matter what I faced, whether it was going to be super hard or like weight gain, which seemed literally terrifying back then. Like, it seemed like the worst thing in the entire world, or trying new foods, or never exercising. Like, I was going to do it because I wanted my life back. And I'm actually really proud of myself for continuing to commit to that when I am struggling, when I am in my head. I never stray away from recovery. I know that the core of who I am wants to have a good relationship with myself and with food. And I kind of advocate for that girl every single day, and I fight for her every day, even when it's really, really hard. And so, yeah, just thanks for that reminder, because I sometimes forget like why I did this in the first place. You can get so far away from the beginning of your mental health journey that you forget actually how far you've come, and you forget to give yourself that grace even a year in. Like, and I literally celebrate a year in recovery tomorrow, and it should be a celebration thing, and instead you beat yourself up of like, I'm not where I want to be yet. Like, story of my life.
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations. 1 year, that's a huge
Thank you.
milestone no matter what you're trying to accomplish, but especially an eating disorder. I think you said it perfectly. You need these milestones, right? There's a reason that marathons have mile markers, so you know how long. People think it's so you know how long you have left. I argue so it's how far you've already come. You're like, oh, I've already ran 13 miles, not, oh, I only have 10 left. It's that cup half
Yeah.
full mentality, right? Your legs might be tired, you might not feel them, but you're like, okay, I've already done 13 miles. I have less left, right? Once you do the hardest part about anything is starting it. But that's why I think that marathons have mile markers. Obviously, it's probably so you know how much you have left, but that's how I like to think of it. Um, so many people, to kind of almost bring it full circle here, when there is so many options, when we see so many stories, when we hear so many failures, successes, and journeys, we become overwhelmed. We're scared of the length that it could take for recovery. We're scared of the effort that needs to come in. Like you said, we don't trust ourselves. We lack some of that self confidence, and then we're just confused again. What would you say to anyone listening who desperately wants to start, knows they want better for themselves, but is just scared of the journey now that you're a year in?
I think what it got down to for me was I saw two clear options ahead of me. There was one path where I continued down my eating disorder, and I would stay miserable, I would stay isolated, and I would stay struggling for the rest of my life, because that it doesn't just go away one day. And I want people to know that. You're not going to wake up and all of a sudden the eating disorder is gone. You're literally going to have it for the rest of your life if you don't get help. And I don't say that to scare you. I say that to encourage you towards the second path, which is, okay, you might gain weight. It's not going to be the end of the world. If someone was going to hand you happiness on a silver platter and said, but you have to gain 10 pounds, are you seriously going to choose a lifetime of misery over the 10 extra pounds and happiness? And again, it might not be 10 pounds for you. I'm not saying it is. It wasn't, I don't even know what it was for me. That's not the point. The point is, gaining weight truly could just give you your entire life back and give you the happiness that you want. Why would you choose any other option? And I specifically remember that night when I called my mom. I was so freaking terrified. I was like, I don't want to do this. I didn't want to choose recovery because I wanted recovery, but I didn't want the weight gain. And I knew that was a big part of my recovery. And so I kind of just had to say, like, at the end of the day, like, I'm going to do this for my future self. The future self I know is going to be happy after I did this, even though I'm freaking terrified and running blind into the wilderness. Like, some version of me is going to be happy I did this. And yeah, looking back, I'm really, really happy that I did that, because it took a lot of just faith in something that I couldn't see and didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate the notion that you just said, like, if someone was to offer you happiness on a silver platter, would you gain those 10 pounds or would you lose those 10 pounds? But for you, it was gain. And I think if anyone's still searching for resources, if you're still in that phase of your journey, Worthy by Jamie Kern Lima is a fantastic option to read. I think one of her chapters is titled "Don't Wait on Your Weight," a little play on words there. And she, in an episode on the Jay Shetty podcast, she goes into how she was sitting at the pool one day and she was afraid to go into the pool with her kids because she was what she considered overweight and didn't want to be seen in her bikini. She was just so embarrassed. But it was that moment that she was like, wait a minute, my kids are smiling. I think her husband was in the pool, if I'm not mistaken. They're having a blast, and they're like, "Come on, mom! Come on, mom!" And it was from that moment, that was her aha moment, where she's like, "No longer am I going to wait on my weight. I'm not going to miss out on my kids splashing around in the pool. Their smiles are too precious, right?" So I think if you are still in that stage where you need another resource, listen to that episode of the Jay Shetty podcast, or consider Worthy by Jamie Kern Lima. To get back to your story, though. Actually, Stutz. Holy crap, that just came to my mind. That's the Jonah Hill film. Stutz.
Oh,
Holy crap,
okay,
that came
cool,
out of
cool.
nowhere. Sorry, that had to come
I
out in
love
the
it.
air before I
Okay, so
forgot.
I'm
That
really
was sitting in the back of my that so I do have OCD, and it's just one of those things I was like, you have to figure it out, dude. But yeah, anyways, to get back to you, I know you're very open about this on social media as well. Kind of a 180 hard shift here, but there is so much to you to fit into one episode. I want to make sure that we touch on a little bit of everything. Your husband and the partner of someone who has an eating disorder. I'll let you take the floor there because I don't really know where to start. I don't know the right questions to ask. How important has he been in your journey?
Yeah, my husband's been really great. I will say it started off so different than it ended as far as like his support. Like he truly didn't understand what an eating disorder was. He had a very fix it mentality the first year of our marriage. We're going into year 5, which is crazy because I feel super young. But yeah, that first year of marriage, I just remember he was so confused. He was like, I don't know what to do. I just want her to get better. Like what do I do? How do I fix it? And honestly, I see that with a lot of male partners or dads in general. So I just want to encourage anyone in the recovery community who has a strong male figure like that in your life. Like it's okay that they have that fix it mentality, but they can grow and they can learn. Right now, he's such a different person than he was then. And I think it just took a lot of time and a lot of just listening and him being willing and able to listen. And so for me, a lot of it was communicating my needs to him like, hey, this is what I need out of this conversation. I either need advice or I just need a shoulder to cry on. And so that's kind of how we started approaching our conversations is he already knows. He's like, okay, what do you need from me? Instead of like, how can I fix this? He turns it back in on himself and he's like, what do you need from me? Do you need advice? Do you need a shoulder to cry on? Do you need additional support? Whatever it is. And so yeah, I just want to encourage anyone listening, be patient with those closest to you and your partner. Be open and honest about what you're going through, but also know that if they don't respond at first how you want them to, that's like super normal. It's going to take time. You exist kind of in this disordered world that's really unfamiliar to them, and it's going to take time for them to adjust to your world and what it looks like. Keep in mind, you're literally having to give them like those goggles that we use for the solar eclipse. Like they need full on goggles to like see into your world. Like it's a completely different world. And so I think just being super patient and communicative.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that goes back to the part where we referenced you can't be mad at someone for something they don't know, right? But once they learn, once they adapt, once they have that aha moment, as you've said openly on social media, it's got to be a relief for you. But as someone who has a fix it mentality themselves, it's such a relief for the person, right? When they care about someone else so much that they just want to be there for them, they want to help them through the problem. They honestly would take the problem for that person at some points in order to fix it. Like I know I've been there with some of the people I love in my life. I'm like, I pray, God, just give it to me so they don't have to deal with it. But that's not how that works, right? So I think the 3 most important things you said, if someone has that fix it mentality and are willing to admit it to at least themselves, just start the conversation with, Hi, how are you? What can I do to help you? And then just purely listen. Just purely listen. That is the biggest part. Even if you think you have the answer, even if you do have the answer, the person who you're listening to might not be ready to hear it. They might not be that far along in their journey. What you think could fix it now could fix it in 3 months. So hold on to that thought. Don't dismiss that part of yourself that wants to help. Just restructure how you help, right? Because listening is as powerful as speaking. What was that? At least in your opinion, I'm curious. We might have to get your husband to pop in really quick and tell us himself if he's around. But what do you think was his aha moment in your journey? Was it when you were explicit with him and told him your needs, or do you think he just one day it just clicked for him?
Again, I it's so tough because I feel like my story is like really almost dramatic, but like he plays baseball. He's not here right now. He's actually traveling, but he plays baseball. It used to be across the country. He was in California for a while, and we live on the East Coast. And it was actually when I told my mom, like, hey, I'm struggling. I'm having a mental breakdown. I don't want to keep doing this. What do I do? And she communicated to him, like, hey, this is what's going on with your wife. That completely rocked his world. To be honest, I wasn't always super open and transparent about my situation until literally a year ago when I first told my mom. Like, that's kind of when I say, like, I'm truly walking into this space of like the true Tori. I really am so new at this and so new at being honest and open and communicative. And so I kind of didn't really do myself any favors. I left him in the dark for a good like 4 years of our marriage. And I'm happy that we finally have gotten to the place where it's a lot better. But I really want to encourage people, like, tell people sooner rather than later, because it was just a really kind of dramatic, like, he's hearing about it across the country and feels helpless and can't do anything. And that's the last thing you want from someone supporting you.
Yeah, that is definitely a unique situation, but I wonder if it is as unique as you think. Because not as much as we are a very open, sharing, and communicative world at the moment, we hold the things that mean the most to us so dear, as you just shared, even with the people you love the most. If you were, and I hate playing this game, but I'm going to do it right now because I would feel remiss if I didn't. If you were to go back to a younger Tori and tell your husband sooner, what would you have said?
That's a good question. I don't even know if I had the language at the time to communicate what I actually needed to communicate. I think this past year of recovery has just given me an entirely new set of language with which to understand how to navigate an eating disorder and how to navigate recovery. Younger Tori, given her circumstances, truly did the best she could. She thought that keeping things inside and just doing her best to fix it and to just eat healthier tomorrow, or run more tomorrow, that's like truly what I thought was going to get me through. And I was so focused on being a supportive wife and being a supportive daughter and all of these different things that I forgot to check in on myself. And so, had I had that language that I have now, I would have just said, hey, I'm genuinely struggling. I don't know what to do. Can you please just partner with me and help me with this? Like, I think it can be as simple as that because the people you love want to do that for you. But I was just so unwilling to even ask that and to start the journey of recovery because I think it had less to do with them. I think they were always supportive. I think I've always had a really supportive family. I had to get to the point where I was like, no, I'm actually ready to do this, because people can only fight for your recovery for so long before you actually are going to fight for it yourself. And so when I go back, and sorry, this is such a long answer, but it's really making me think. When I go back, 5 years ago, it probably would have taken 5 years of hell like it did for me to truly be like, okay, now I'm going to choose recovery, because I'm really hard headed and I'm really like, oh no, like I'm going to try this way first. And it took me 5 years to realize that way just wasn't working. So, all that to say, if I could go back with my current knowledge, I would love to tell 19-year-old self just to never start a diet at all. But I truly believe like that happened for a reason. And I mean, I guess I wouldn't have the platform I have today without it. So,
Yeah, I appreciate your honesty in the answer. And I think now you are probably the most self aware and in tune with yourself that you've ever been. I mean, obviously, just through your speech, and you did it inadvertently. You didn't beat yourself up for something you didn't know back then, right? You said, if I had the language that I had back then. You played the what if game in the most mentally conscious way possible, right? And that, like you said, that wasn't always the case. So that just goes back to the beginning notion of what you don't know, you can't beat yourself up over, because that's just going to extend your recovery, no matter what it is, no matter what you're struggling with, right? Even if it's a physical recovery. Like, I mean, obviously eating disorder is mental and physical recovery, but I'm referring to physical recovery in the sense of like a broken bone or a tear in a ligament, right? If you think at this point in your journey you're supposed to be back up to, if it's an ACL torn, you're supposed to have it bent 90 degrees, you're 2 weeks behind. Like, if you're doing everything you can to the best of your knowledge, right, to what your therapist or your physical trainer tells you, to the workout routine, you can't be upset over it. Well, you can be upset over it. That was a poor choice of words. You can't beat yourself up over it. You have the right to feel upset, and that's also a part of the journey. But I I mean, I am so curious. That's probably a downfall, but also the reason why I have this platform. But when you say like, when we play this what if game, what has been the most dangerous part of the what if game for you? Because I don't think this is talked about enough. I just say we say don't play the what if game and we move on, but we all play the what if game, right? We tiptoe around it. We all don't want to play it. Like I said, we all say don't play it. We all hear don't play it, but we all play it. I played it earlier today. I said, what if I don't make this episode on time? And I was like, dude, you'll be fine. You live 5 minutes from your gym. You can go to the gym. Like, that's a simple, oversimplified example. But for you and your personal recovery, what happens when you play the what if game, and how can you become mentally conscious, like you just were sharing a moment ago?
yeah, I think it's really easy to what if the past and what if the future. So it's not even just one thing. I think a lot of my what ifs with the past is a lot of regret over, having developed this illness in the first place and a lot of shame around that. And I'm really trying to navigate, I lost the beginning of my 20s. That's not something I can ever get back. And your 20s are at least romanticized as being, some of the best years of your life, your early 20s. And I feel like I missed out on that, like a lot of it. And so it is really hard for me. Like, I think in many ways you have to grieve and you have to mourn that piece of yourself that never really came to be. But I like what you said of just, you can allow yourself to feel those emotions, but you don't have to beat yourself up over it. You truly can only control the next steps that you take. That's actually phenomenal advice for me in this moment, because I mean, I do want to be transparent, and I've been so transparent about this on my social media. These past couple months have been really hard for me. Like, I might look like I'm really, really happy right now, but beneath the surface, like, I'm struggling. Like, I'm not, you know, I'm what ifing everything. I feel like I should be at a certain place in my recovery. I thought a year in, I would be so much farther along. I feel like I have failed in many ways because I'm not doing recovery perfectly. I am scared that I am never going to fully recover, or, God forbid, I gain another 50 pounds, because my brain says stuff like that too. So I just like, I think all of this shows the what if game will result in spirals. If you let it, that what if game is going to spiral you, whether it's into depression over what ifing the past or anxiety over what ifing the future. And right now, in this like kind of moment and in this time period of my life, I'm truly just trying to offer myself grace for the things that I can't control. I can only control the effort I'm giving every single day. And I'm truly doing the best I can. And I do have to repeat to myself in these low mood times, like that is enough. And there is no what ifs. Like there's only now, and like you can control the now.
Yeah, bringing yourself to where your feet are is a common theme that we've heard from everyone that has stepped on and shared their story on this podcast. So I appreciate you for bringing that back up again. But what I don't think we've heard, which is unique to you, is the exact thoughts of a what if spiral. I mean, those are very true, very real thoughts that you just shared. As for anyone struggling with an ED, how do you, and then we'll move on to another little segment here, but if you're okay with answering, how do you bring yourself back to where your feet are? Do you have any methods that you've worked on with your therapist, or is it just something where you catch yourself in the act? Because for some people, and I've been a person who's done this before myself, like these what if games can last days at times, like every waking moment that you have, right? If you're not distracting yourself. So how do we avoid it, or how do we stop it before it gets there?
Yeah, and again, so I don't just struggle with an ED, right? Like I struggle with so many different mental health things. And when I'm doing really, really well, my mental health is doing really, really well. But when a lot of changes are happening around me, when I'm not feeling comfortable and stressed out, like that spiral can just so easily happen. And even like what you just said, Caleb, like the past couple of days, even for me, I'm like, wow, I'm really in my head. And I think what has really just grounded me is I always say that recovery offers hope while my eating disorder only offered hopelessness. Like I know I have hope. And I just want every person to know that it actually is temporary. Whatever you're going through, it truly is temporary. The only thing that would have been eternal is like that eating disorder or that struggle if you would allow yourself to like go back to it and really sit in it. I think just allowing yourself to be in the moment and like talking to yourself like a friend. Like I really try to do that because if my best friend were sitting here and was like, I'm so struggling, like I'm all up in my head, I don't know what to do, like help me, I'd be like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? You're amazing. I love you so much. Like you're the most important person in my life. And it's like, why can't I extend that same kindness to myself? And so my huge focus right now is on just trusting myself again, trusting God because my faith is super important to me, and trusting my body because life is a game of trust. We can't control everything. We and there's actually a beauty in that. And so I'm trying to rediscover that beauty and just reconnect with that like trust in myself and that everything's going to be okay. I think we can give so much power to the negative. Why not give just as much power to the positive?
Yeah, yeah, life is like this uncomfortable balance of trust, whether it's with yourself or any of the other interpersonal relationships you might have in your life. And I think it's so important what you said, but it's so often overlooked just because we hear it so much. Like I could scroll through Instagram right now and hear someone say what you just said probably 100 times and be like, okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. But that also, there's got to be something to it, right? If you're hearing it this many times, when does it not become a coincidence anymore? This message is supposed to reach you. So if you're struggling to give yourself self love, that grace, that um, trust that you so desire, really, truly take out your journal or just look in the mirror and smile, right? I mean, smiling does something. There is some sort of chemical, dopamine, serotonin, something. I know there is. I'm not smart enough to know what it's called, but I know it's there. If you need that self love, smile at yourself in the mirror. Quite do it. It sounds stupid, but do it like you're a friend. Just, hey, how are you doing today? Smile and then walk away. And then answer yourself in your head honestly. And then what would your friend say to you in order to cheer your mood up? Say that to yourself. What would your friend suggest that knows you best, your best friend? What would they suggest to help you? Maybe take that suggestion at heart. Or better yet, call your best friend, ask them how they're doing, and have them reciprocate the question, and then truthfully answer them and say, tell them your needs. Just say, like Tori said, hey, I just need you to listen right now. I'm not doing well. I'm going through this, and this. I really appreciate your confidentiality. I just needed to say that. Or what suggestions do you have? You know me the best out of anyone. that I can think of in this given moment. That's why I'm calling you. What do you suggest? And if you're the friend on the other side of that phone and that weight is too much for you in the moment, there's also no shame in that. You can tell your friend, like, hey, you're heard, you're seen, you're loved. That is a big question for me right now. That is just a huge responsibility. And I'm here for you. I care for you. But the best I can do is be that ear right now. There is absolutely no shame in that either. And I think that sometimes is stigmatized as well. Like, you have to have an answer. But much like your husband, who didn't know a lot of the terminology or the struggle of an eating disorder, his best at the moment was listening. And that is beautiful as long as it's with pure intention and the best. Do you have any advice for maybe someone? I know I just went in a whole bunch of different directions, but
Oh, no, you're
for
fine. Yeah.
for someone who is on the other end of that receiving call, because I feel like they don't get enough attention either, and that is a huge responsibility. If you
Mhm.
don't know exactly what to say, what do you do?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I just want to make sure that that person's taking care of themselves. Recognize that supporting someone with mental health issues, especially if you're doing it on a regular basis, can be draining for you as well. And so I want that person to make sure that they're doing the things off the phone to make sure that they're okay mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all the things. So do the self care, do the journaling, meet with a therapist if needed, and just take care of yourself. Um, I think in my experience, most of the time, people don't really want advice per se. They just want the person, or at least I typically want the person to tell me that everything's going to be okay. We don't go to people so that they can fix our problems. We go to people so that we don't feel alone. And so if you can just help that person feel a little bit less alone, say something encouraging, say, "Hey, my week would have sucked if we didn't grab coffee 2 days ago," or whatever it is. Like, let that person know that they make an important impact on your life and that you're just here for them and you love them. Because that's a lot of times just what people want. They want that connection. And I think even bringing, like, it's so funny because I had a FaceTime call with my best friend last night because I was like, Mimi, I'm just down in the dumps. Like, I don't know what's going on. And we were able to just like kind of make a joke out of it and like laugh a little bit. I'm not saying that that works for everyone, but sometimes you just need to bring humor into things because we take things so deeply. I make my eating disorder or my mental health issues feel like the worst thing in the world. And with that comes so much shame and so much judgment, but everyone has something. And that's just the thing that I struggle with. And like sometimes you just need to take a step back and be like, it's important, but it's really not that deep. Life is so much bigger. Just take a step back. And I think that's kind of what I would tell that person, that supportive person as well, is like try to just pop them out of that bubble that they're in. Because usually the person calling you isn't a bubble. Just pop it. Try to get them to come out into reality a little bit.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And again, we do that in every other area of our life, and we don't even realize it, right? We say, oh, we're so much more than our job. We're so much more than our sport. We're so much more than the grade we get on our test. We're so much more than the negative self thoughts in our head. But
Yes.
when they are so deeply ingrained in our head, and especially if you exist in the mental health world like yourself and myself does, I don't know if that English was proper, and that's
No,
going to
I
make me
think it
laugh. But
was.
if you are as ingrained in the mental health world as either Tori or myself, that was much better. We're not going to edit that part out, though. We're going to leave it in there because it's part of the episode now. But if you are that deep into something, right? If your husband, sometimes he probably just solely identifies as an athlete, right? But
Mhm.
he's so much more. Why don't we do that for ourselves? And like Tori said, if you are that friend or that loved one on the other side of the phone or the other side of the conversation, because sometimes it does happen in person, which I think is beautiful, but try to help them understand at the very least, if you don't have advice, that they are so much more than what that little guy on their evil shoulder, that little girl on that evil shoulder is telling them. Because you might not see that person on their shoulder, but the person coming to you, I'm almost willing to put all my money on it, has been listening to that person on their shoulder for at least a day. And one day is exhausting, even more is just ruthless. So pop the bubble, as Tori would say. Help them understand they are so much more than the negative self talk that they have in their head. I do want to transition here into boundary setting. And I think we're kind of getting there. I think it's a beautiful little transition. When you choose to let someone into your struggles or go public about it like you have, that's a whole new world. And I think they're two very major steps. And I guess I'll leave the floor open to you, but I know personally when I open up about my struggles, my anxiety, my OCD, and some of the stuff I've seen, I don't want to be reminded of it every day. I don't want to be asked, "Oh, how are you doing? Are you still struggling?" Like, "Oh my gosh, like how far along are you?" Like, yes, it's our choice to put it out there, but it's not, again, it's not who I am every single second of the day. How do you, or how did you set those boundaries, maybe, if you're willing to share, with your mom after she found out? Because I'm sure she wanted to call you every day, or with your husband, or with the world eventually. How did you set up those boundaries, and how are you working through that?
Yeah, and honestly, I want to be transparent and say I haven't quite figured it out. I think that's what I'm navigating currently, like literally right now. So, I kind of see different phases to my recovery. It was when I was in my eating disorder, I identified as the healthy fit girl. Then when I decided to choose recovery, I highly identified as this like pro body positivity, pro recovery, mental health advocate. Like that's who I am now. And now, once all the dopamine of that initial jolt of like, wow, people care about my opinion and I'm so loved and supported because trust me, once you get a following, it fades pretty quick. Now I'm kind of figuring out, okay, who actually is Tori though? If it's not my body, it's not the healthy fit girl, it's not a mental health advocate, it's not someone who struggles with her mental health every single day. Like, who am I? And I'm just trying to honestly navigate that right now. I feel like I'm definitely in a stage where God is preparing me for this next stage in my life. And I think that's why I have experienced recently some like more mental internal battles. Um, but yeah, I think it's really just important at the end of the day to realize that this is your life. It's not anyone else's. At some point, being that awesome mental health advocate for other people wasn't fulfilling to me anymore. And so, although it is very fulfilling, it's just not, it can't be all of me. That's not who I am at my core. I want an identity that is so multifaceted that it can't be summarized by one thing and that my worth can't be summarized by one thing because let me tell you when and sorry, I know I'm going all over the place. I feel like this is almost like therapy for me, so it's great. But I feel like when you do, especially on the social media end with these recovery influencers, when you do put all of your worth into how well recovery is going, you will crash and burn if you have a tough day or, a tough couple months like I have. I mean, this has definitely been a season of additional growth for me and the fact that I know I don't want to be defined by my mental health. I know I don't want my eating disorder or my trauma or whatever it is to be a part of me. And so I'm very much questioning like, what is the future of my Instagram account? And like, how do I want to create boundaries with it in the future? And I don't have that perfectly kind of figured out yet, but it's exciting to know that I won't have to be defined by one thing because I definitely think that that didn't serve me.
You hinted at it. I think it is this beautiful mix of what comes next that is as terrifying as it is inspiring. Like that's what you're looking forward to. Like you know it's right around the corner because you have taken those steps out of the eating disorder identity, out of the mental health advocacy, not completely necessarily, but just you've taken steps and dragged them along the way, right? Because it never goes away, as you alluded to. But like, I don't know why this just came to my head, and this is probably the worst reference I could use, but I'm going to say it because that's me. You're like the hobo leaving the house with the sack over your shoulder, right, and the stick, and now all
Yeah.
those parts of you are in that, and you're bringing them with you, but like No one wants to look at that. No one wants to see that. So it's kind of
Yeah,
behind you as
yeah.
you go into literally a street forward, and you could take any direction you want. That was probably the shittiest analogy I could have ever used. Sorry for my language, but
No.
that's how I see it, because to me it truly is, right? Those are all the quote unquote ugly parts of ourselves
Yeah.
that we don't want to bring with us, but we have to, right? It's like that old sweaty t-shirt from 6th grade that you're like emotionally connected to and you don't know why. You want to throw it out, but you have to bring it with you. Sometimes that's what mental health feels like, right? We've already compartmentalized, we've already unpacked it, but you just can't leave it behind. It's part of you. Someone else in your life knows it's there. You know it's there. So just bring it with you, right? It doesn't have to be the center of your life anymore, but it can still be part of you. And the one thing I've noticed too throughout your episode, and again, I love that I'm seeing this theme, so I'll bring it to the forefront of this episode at the end here, is the power and perspective. The the power and choice, really. There's always a choice, and you're not always going to make the right one. For the longest time, I avoided eating food and only drank soda and coffee to get my energy. It was a bad choice, right? I still can have a cup of coffee. I still can have 6 cups of coffee. I could bring that with me, but it's not who I am. It's the choice to have 3 cups of coffee as opposed to one now, right? So the power of perspective and choice is something so strong that we could spend probably another hour talking about. Um, but I want to open up the floor to you here before we get into this final segment of the episode. Is there anything that you want people to know about you, about your journey, about anything in general? I know this is such a wide open question, but I love to ask our guests if they have any final thoughts to leave our audience with before we get into the last segment here.
This is a really specific thing, but I feel like it causes a lot of issues. So I'm just going to say, like, I just want everyone to know social media truly is fake. I cannot tell you, like, I'm so in the space of social media, and the comparison game is such a big part about that. And there's so many good things to social media, and I love the community I built on there. But also know you're seeing a snapshot, a 1% of someone's entire day. And I say that knowing full well that, guys, yesterday I posted a 1 year in recovery reel where I was smiling and I was challenging food. And all of that's true. Like, I am proud of myself for how far I've come. But again, I've been so transparent about to my community, I'm struggling. I'm not feeling that good about myself. Like, I'm not doing great. But anyone who just saw that on their For You page would have thought I was the queen of the world and a recovery, badass. And so I just want to say, at least from my perspective, take everything you see with a grain of salt. Use and consume that content if it inspires you. But the second it causes comparison, shut your phone off, turn it away, go live your life. Like this, at the end of the day, I hate it when people use those cliches of when you're 80 or 90, but when truly, when you are at the end of your life, you're going to want to look back and be like, I lived for me, not for anyone else. I lived for me. And so that's what I want to encourage you to do. Put down your phone, stop comparing, get outside, live for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I needed to hear that because I had recently flown to Detroit, Michigan to give a speech, a mental health speech. And I only posted myself at a baseball game, myself at the NFL draft, and then, I don't know, the fact that I celebrated, I made like a poster for the speech, and then obviously the speech itself. But like what people didn't see is I got up at 4 a.m. to leave, and I was exhausted from the second I walked out the door until the second I got back. But because the trip filled my cup, I was able to give myself the energy to smile, to give the presentation. So I want to point out too, like both of these things can coexist. You can be
Yeah.
Tori, the recovery badass, but you can also be Tori, the struggling former eating disorder identifier. I don't know. It was a
Yeah. Yeah.
horrible way to phrase it, but
No,
I
no,
think you get the
of
point.
course. Yeah.
I think I've been guilty of it as well. We love to put people in categories. We
Yeah.
just love to. Like, I don't know why. Like, we even obviously genres of books and like libraries are a certain thing, but like the world is genuinely a giant library of just categorized people for right, wrong, or indifferent. When people belong in so many different categories. I mean, by day, I belong in the business section of the library. By evening I belong in the coaching section of the library, and then at nighttime I belong in the mental health side of the library. Like you can walk around the library and buy 3 different books. You don't have to buy into this one version of self. So I really appreciate you saying that and being honest that even though we see the recovery badass Tori a majority of the time on social media, there is so much more to you. And I know it's something you've been working on, transparency and letting your community know, but it is appreciated. We just wanted to let you know that. So thank you for telling my community here, or our community, as it's growing. So
Thank you. Yeah, you have so many good quotes, by the way. Like that library, I'm going to use that. I love that. I love a metaphor. Anything I can visualize, I'm like, okay, this is helpful.
that's me, right? I'm such a visual learner. I don't know. I'm like a big mind map guy. I was like
Yeah.
sixth grade me was thrilled to find out that mind maps exist because I never studied after that. I don't know why. I would to
That's
study, I
so
would just like draw it on a piece of paper, look at it, and I could close my eyes when the test came around and like visually see where it was on the paper. I don't
yeah.
think it's photographic memory, but it's some sort of weird memory.
That
I've been
is
starting
so
to
weird. I do the same thing. Like literally, I would locate it on the page, like in my
yeah,
head, and that's how I memorize stuff.
yeah, I don't know. It's like some sort of association. So like when I'd
Yeah,
study and like try and memorize stuff for like the SATs or whatever, I would put all of my formulas in like the top right, for instance, and
yeah.
I would read the first half of the formula and then close my eyes and I could see the second half. And it was just
Me
weird.
too. I'm
But I
like,
still sucked at math. So it didn't really
yeah,
help me too much,
I
but
wasn't.
like at least I could memorize that.
I'm
But
like, maybe that's a little superpower that God gave our OCD brains. I'm like, He gave us OCD, but maybe we can like mind map. I don't know.
yeah, no. So what that goes to show you, like I didn't piece that together until 3 years into my journey, my mental health. I mean, my mental health journey stems way back, at least 14 to 15 years ago. But my awareness piece of my mental health journey, I worked with my second therapist and still am on mind mapping out my problems, right? And to me, right now, that looks like CBT charts. Like I can map those out. Like it gives me something physical to look at. So, like, that's why I said if it's in my head, I can map it out. This is just a little insight to me. I don't want to go too far into it because this is about you, but I can, I can take, I don't know, what am I struggling with at the moment? Boundary setting, actually. It's probably why I brought it up. I can take we'll just say my dad. I don't have problems boundary setting with my dad, but like I don't want to tell my dad about a terrible soccer game I played, right? I can write his name on the paper, write everything I want to tell him, write everything he wants to tell me, close my eyes and see it. And then when I go to have the conversation with my dad, I could just close my eyes and say, okay, what do I not want to tell my dad? Or what do I think he should know? And that's such a unique way for me to work through things. And honestly, I don't even know if my therapist knows that she's helping me do it, but she is, like, probably subliminally. But that's just one way I work through it. And again, it definitely probably has to do with my OCD brain. And my dad is just purely an example. I don't have boundary settings,
No,
Dad,
yeah,
if you're
yeah.
listening to this with him. But yeah, he's always like, use me if you want to, bud. So
Oh, that's a good
uh,
dad. That's a really good dad.
yeah, yeah. Like you, I am very blessed with a support system that sometimes I ignore and neglect, but we're working through that.
Yeah.
But
It's also my dad's birthday today, so if he ever listens to this, I love you, Dad. Happy 70th. He's 70. I'm like, oh my goodness. He was an older dad, but yeah.
I I think my dad's closer to 60, so
Yeah,
still
that
up
makes
there. But
sense. He was an older dad.
uh,
He's awesome.
hey, but we love dads, we love moms, we love family members that are supportive, and we just continue to ask them to bear with us as we sort through the quite literal maze in our head. Even if we don't tell you, we love you and we appreciate you, and bear
Yes.
with us because we're getting there. With that said, actually, an inadvertent transition into the last part of the Make Mental podcast, Tori. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So, if there is one person in the entire world who you think at this very moment in time needs a hug, who would you give your hug to and why?
Oh my gosh. That's really, really hard. Oh my gosh. This is like actually like one hug. I can only give one hug. This is killing me. I'm like, I want to give everyone a hug. Okay, you know what I'm gonna say? This is gonna be a really, really almost, it sounds narcissistic, but it's not, and it's very out of the box. But I would love to give younger me a hug, like younger 7-year-old Tori who went through really tough trauma and thought she was never going to be okay and was really confused why her brain started attacking her after this trauma. I just want to tell her things are going to get better. This was not your fault. Everything's going to be okay, and you're going to be a badass, and it's going to be okay. Yeah. And I'd give her a hug while I said all that.
Oh, that is awesome. I think you're the first person to give yourself a hug, your younger version of self a hug, but I love that.
Yeah.
That is so cool. And again, I don't think we do it enough, right? I think we use the mile markers in our life as, oh, this is how far I have left to go. But what you just did inadvertently is use that 7-year-old mile marker in your life is, look how far I've come. And that serves
Yeah.
as a reminder for honestly right now in your past couple of months that you've been open about struggling is you've done it once. You could do it
Yeah.
again. Happiness will come to you on a silver platter if you work for it, using your
Yes.
quote there. You just got to keep working for it. But we really appreciate you, Tori, for being so open and honest and for just sharing your wisdom and your journey at such a young age with the mental health community and specifically the eating disordered community. Um, and no, I'm not afraid to say it because sometimes that gets a bad connotation and we skip around the words that really matter the most. So, eating disordered community, this is for you. We hope you feel loved, connected, and heard. And just, yeah, I can't say thank you enough, Tori, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.